It was an awesome race in Austin, as we had a battle for the win between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. It was reminiscent of last year's World Championship, with the race going down to the wire. There's a lot to talk about, so here's my 5 things we learned from the US Grand Prix. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Hamilton gives it his all, but it's to no avail. Lewis Hamilton had one of his strongest weekends of the year. He's been laser focused on achieving a race win this season, with his record of winning in every single season he's competed in on the line. The Mercedes has tended to struggle in qualifying trim, and with Perez and Leclerc serving grid drop penalties, there was an opportunity for Hamilton and Mercedes to get a second row start, which would put them in a good position with their car tending to have stronger race pace. After the Turn 1 incident resulting in Russell's penalty and Sainz's retirement, we were left with an all too familiar sight, with Verstappen leading from Lewis Hamilton. Sure, at that point we didn't expect it to be as close as it ended up being, considering Red Bull's advantage, but it was nice to see nonetheless. Following that pit stop issue for Verstappen, the fight was on. Hamilton had the net lead, with Verstappen stuck behind Charles Leclerc and having to use more of his medium compound tyre in his efforts to get past the Ferrari early in the final stint. Meanwhile, Hamilton was putting in the lap times on his hard tyres as he lapped in clean air. Once Verstappen managed to clear Leclerc, it was then a game of cat and mouse as Verstappen hunted down his championship rival of last year, and it was on lap 50 of 56 that Verstappen finally got the DRS, which gave him the distinct advantage he needed to make the move stick through turn 12. It was a strong effort from Hamilton and Mercedes as he kept fighting going on into the coming corners, but the overtake seemed inevitable given the pace differential between those two cars. Hamilton did keep it interesting towards the end of the race, and it was a good opportunity missed for Mercedes as they gave it their all on this occasion. Not many expected them to be up there and able to compete this weekend in Austin, but he was able to hold on to the Red Bull right up towards the end of the race before his rear tyres went off. It was a great battle to watch and made this race interesting. So overall, I'm going to go for a green box for Lewis Hamilton. He was within touching distance of the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, and to be honest, I don't think there was much more he could have done to win that battle. But the fact he was in it at all shows how well he did this weekend. Aston Martin's potentially great weekend tarnished. Aston Martin's season has really been a tale of two halves, and this weekend had the potential to be brilliant for the Silverstone-based team. Aston Martin were probably the 4th fastest team in the race as both drivers were able to take advantage of the chaos ahead of them and were even running 3rd and 5th after the first lap. Sure enough, it was going to be impossible for the Aston Martins to hold on to those positions, particularly with the likes of Perez and Leclerc making their way up the order following their grid drops. But regardless, the team did a brilliant job to maintain the best of the rest spots in the early stages of the race, and that's exactly what the team needed. But it didn't end up that way after a disappointing decision from Stroll and a disappointing pit stop for Vettel. At the summer break, the team sat 9th in the standings with just 20 points on the board though, and since then they've scored a further 29 and they're now just 3 behind Alfa Romeo. This second half resurgence has come about due to a few factors. Their B-Spec car that they brought to the race in Spain earlier this year has started to come into its own, and also the drivers clearly have more confidence in the car in both qualifying and, more importantly, the race. This weekend was going particularly well for Lance Stroll, as he qualified 7th and started 5th in the race, his best starting position since his pole back in Turkey in 2020. This is the kind of performance that we occasionally do see from Stroll. He has really high peaks, and when he has the confidence, he can do really well. But it's been his consistency that's led him down through his career so far. And in the race, on the initial safety car restart, Stroll made a ridiculous defensive move down the straight to try and prevent Alonso from overtaking with the slipstream, and there was simply nothing Alonso could do. It was such a disappointing move from the Canadian driver, as he should know better than that given the overspeed of the Alpine car behind him and how much experience Stroll should have in this sport. The resulting incident was scary to watch, with Alonso almost going airborne after going up the left rear wheel of the Aston Martin. It's remarkable that the Alpine was even able to continue, let alone finish 7th, and it was brilliant drivers from all the cars behind as they managed to navigate their way safely through the smoke and debris. Not only was this incident really disappointing from Stroll, but it was also a huge loss for Aston Martin. That's because it cost them points, but also meant that they have a lot of damage to sort on that car going into the next race in Mexico in 2 weeks' time. Sebastian Vettel, meanwhile, did the team proud, as at one point he was even leading the Grand Prix, which is a brilliant achievement for the German world champion, as he's potentially had his final great race. But on this occasion it was the team that let him down, as they had a problematic pit stop with a tricky front left tyre, which ultimately dropped him right down the order to 13th. It was such a shame for the team and driver, as he had a great opportunity to use a significant tyre advantage over the front runners at the end, perhaps even compete for a podium. But it wasn't to be, as Vettel ended up making a recovery drive as he worked his way through a DRS train, and he did manage to get back to 8th position in the race to bring home 4 points, which included an incredible battle with the Haas of Kevin Magnussen right towards the end, that went down to the penultimate corner of the race. And it shows just how much he could achieve in that car. So overall, I'm going to go for an amber box for Aston Martin. There was so much potential, but a series of unfortunate events meant they failed to capitalise. Before we take a look at Charles Leclerc's race next, I want to take this moment to ask you to subscribe to Behind the Drive if you're enjoying the videos, and leave a like on this one while you're at it. Thanks. Charles Leclerc makes things interesting. This race was at risk of being a bit of a snooze fest, but with an opportune time for the first safety car, Charles Leclerc was in the perfect position to get himself into the mix with the cars at the front. The Ferrari driver qualified second but started 12th after a 10-place grid drop with a new power unit, and I think the Monegasque driver will have been thankful for that additional power, as he needed it to keep it interesting at the front. After the second safety car, Leclerc was running in P4 and hunted down the wounded Red Bull of Sergio Perez, who was lacking a front wing end plate after an earlier incident. Sure enough, the Ferrari driver was trying to take advantage of his power, making moves into turn 12 to try and get past the Red Bull. And after a couple of attempts, Leclerc made a brave move down the inside, which was great to watch. What followed was another opportunistic stop for Ferrari, who stopped on the same lap as Verstappen. This was a surprising decision for me, as Leclerc had gone longer in the first stint, so even with the time behind the safety car, I would have expected the Ferrari would utilise that tyre advantage towards the end of the stint. But you can see why I'm not an F1 race strategist, as it was the right decision for Ferrari, as they benefited from Verstappen's slow pit stop with the front left wheel nut not tightening on the Red Bull. As a result, the pair who were fighting for the championship early on this year were battling on track once again, and it was an awesome race between the two, with switchback moves before Verstappen made the decisive DRS overtake down into turn 12. It was great to see these two battle on track once again, and I have to say this season is really one that could have been. Sure, the Red Bull has been the strongest car this year, but Ferrari have absolutely dropped the ball at times as well. In the end, it was a battle that Leclerc would inevitably lose, with Verstappen being so strong in Austin, but to hold on to a podium finish from 12th on the grid is indeed a brilliant achievement for the Ferrari driver, so it's a green box for Leclerc. From bad to worse for Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo's 2022 season has been a challenging one. They started off in the fight with the best of the rest in the early part of this year, and they had a car that was able to compete with the likes of Mercedes in the first few rounds. However, it seems like in the latter stages of the season the team have struggled to maintain those performances. There are several reasons for this, including the fact that the other teams have clearly outdeveloped them through the year. Plus, with Alfa Romeo confirming that they're parting ways with Sauber for 2023, you have to wonder whether that team has the same amount of investment, given there's no longer term benefits for the lead sponsor. But this weekend, the Alfa Romeos look like they've managed to find some of the pace that they'd lost out to their rivals. In FP2, Bottas even managed to put his Alfa Romeo second, which was really impressive. The track characteristics at Kota clearly played into the Swiss team's hands, but after qualifying where Bottas put it P9 to start P7, and Zhou Guanyu ended up P14 after a lap time was deleted, it looked like there was a slim chance for the Finnish driver to convert that starting position into a strong haul of points. But it wasn't to be, with Zhou having a tough time after the grid drop, and Bottas spinning out into the gravel trap and out of the race. In the end, it was another pointless weekend for Alfa Romeo, and they're now under threat from Aston Martin, who have the momentum with them going into the final 3 rounds. For me, I think Alfa Romeo missed out on perhaps their best opportunity to secure some more points this year, and after that result, it's a red box for me for this weekend's showing. Lando Norris somehow recovers. One of the biggest losers through the early safety car phases was Lando Norris. The McLaren driver reportedly had damage and was running well outside of the points after those stops. But what followed was one of the best recovery drives from Norris in what seemed like a race full of recovery drives. Norris made a charge back through the field to take the best of the rest spot in 6th, overtaking Fernando Alonso on the penultimate lap. That move itself was critical given the battle between McLaren and Alpine in the Constructors' Championship. The battle for 4th is an interesting one indeed, and once again it's Norris that's keeping it going for the team. The British driver is having a brilliant season, and is carrying that team, who are now 11 points behind Alpine. It'll be interesting to see how it goes for the final 3 rounds this year, as there's so much that could change between now and then. But it's been a great race for Norris, so he's deserving of a green box for today. Honourable mentions. A couple of honourable mentions, the first of which has got to go to Red Bull and Verstappen, who've achieved their first Constructors' Championship since 2013. It was an inevitability, but they have secured it with 3 races to go, but it was a great result for the team after a difficult weekend for them outside of the track. I also want to give a mention to Kevin Magnussen. Sure, the Haas driver lost a position on the last lap and ended up 9th, but he was the only driver who managed to make the one-stop strategy work, and it's great for Haas to take risks and be rewarded for it. So there we have it. Both championships have been wrapped up with an awesome battle in COTA. There's just 3 more chances for Mercedes and for Verstappen to get the win record this season.